Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Today, I want to talk about the upcoming solar eclipse, which is in the sign of Gemini. Before I start, I just want to share a couple of reflections on things that I have been reflecting on and processing. And I was watching a guy called Sadhguru sharing a dialogue conversation with a famous actor, Matthew McConaughey. I thought it was a very funny conversation. But anyway, Sadhguru had some really fascinating jewels of wisdom that he was just throwing out, offering. And it led me to think very much of the current energies and the Mercury retrograde, the solar eclipse in Gemini, Mercury being the ruler of the solar eclipse in Gemini because Mercury rules Gemini. So the energies is speaking very much to actually intuition, and this solar eclipse belonging to the Saros cycle that it does, what Bernadette Brady has to say, affirms the experience of intuition and sudden flashes of insight. And I'll read what she says a little bit later. There's a few levels. So I really loved something that Sadhguru said, and he said that people have misunderstood the significance of saying, I don't know. In other words, so many people are from that Mercury Gemini level, and this is all about Mercury Gemini. The solar eclipse is in Gemini. Mercury is the ruler. Mercury is retrograde in Gemini. So this is very relevant, a very poignant point, actually. So we get so busy, with our headspace and our ideas and knowledge, our perspectives, and our thoughts around thinking that we know this, we know that, we know a lot. And so he was saying that there's really major significance to realizing that we don't know. And in fact, there is a quote, I'm going to paraphrase now, but it's something like, true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. It's something to that effect, right? And so he says that by realizing and acknowledging that you don't know, what happens is it opens a space for wanting to know, for the seeking to really flow and flourish. Because to stand in a position where you say you know, then you've immediately created the boundaries and the walls, or the structures around your mental sphere, where there is no room for this fluid movement and this exploration of seeking and wanting to know, the desire to want to know more. And so that leads me to the next thing that I was thinking about, which was the quote, know thyself, which is inscribed at one of the old temples, one of Apollo's old temples in Greece, in a place called Delphi. And it's been used through the works of Socrates and Plato as well. So, know thyself. It may sound like it's perhaps sitting at the opposite end of saying I don't know anything, but in fact it's not. It's right there with that. Our greatest responsibility is to know ourselves, right? Because the more we know ourselves, the more conscious, awake we become, the more we can evolve and the less we project out there. So I think that's a really good way to start talking about this current upcoming solar eclipse, which, of course, again, let me just say that when it comes to eclipses, the energies of that are in play for around about a 6-month period. So we are already well and truly into the energy of this particular eclipse. And it actually takes place on the 10th of June. And as I said, it's at 19 degrees virtually 20 degrees of Gemini, and Mercury's right there with the eclipse. There's a few interesting aspects going on there, and I'll bring up the chart and we can have a look at those. I guess some other things to really consider here. Remember, I spoke about Mercury retrograde in a podcast that I uploaded recently, and I suggested that according to the writings of Jeffrey Wolf Green, he says that a Mercury retrograde cycle is very similar to a Jupiter function or a Jupiter signature, because normally Mercury Gemini is the left linear brain. I think it's because I'm an Aries that this happens. Aries is urgency, emergency. Anyway, um, he says that Mercury retrograde really operates from that Jupiter right brain intuitive faculty level. So when Mercury goes retrograde, we naturally, a planet that is turning retrograde by its apparent motion, as from how we how we view it here on Earth, that is, because no planet actually literally moves backwards, right? It's the symbolic and psychological and spiritual um, symbolism to a retrograde process with any planet, which requires us to turn back, uh, step back, and go within. It's always that process, and the nature of the planet is going to describe what is being reevaluated, reflected on, reconsidered, and so forth. And naturally, with Mercury, it's always about our ideas, our learning, our thoughts, our communications, things we say, don't say, and so forth. So there's a number of different levels here that really, relative to the solar eclipse, that really speak to this incredible gift of our intuitive faculty to be really developed at this time, for us to really tune into that, because Mercury retrograde means, hold up, step back, go inside, and have a look at what you've been indiscriminately absorbing into your mental space. Now, we know that mental space, we have over 50,000 thoughts a day. So our mental space can get really blocked and really overwhelmed. There can be anxiety, fears, there can be all sorts of things. Of course, there can be beautiful things, imagination, dreams, fantasies, and things like that as well. And in fact, Jeff says that I found this really funny, and I really relate to it because I have Mercury retrograde in my own chart natally. He actually said that they should have a school just for people who were born with Mercury retrograde. That's just how unique it is and how differently it operates. And he also said that when Mercury goes retrograde, 3 times a year, which it does, then collectively, the whole planet, the whole world is going through that process of Mercury retrograde, and it's not the normal function of how Mercury, operates on a day-to-day basis, right? So this holding back and turning within and really contemplating and sorting through the indiscriminate information that you have absorbed over a period of time. Let's just say from the time that Mercury was retrograde earlier this year, now is the time to really look very carefully, stop, pause, look very carefully with your intuitive faculty as to what needs to be absorbed and integrated further, and what actually needs to be discarded, because not everything we read or everything we hear or everything we take in on a mental level needs to necessarily remain with us. It actually just creates a bit of a chaotic zone in our brain, in our mind. So the Mercury retrograde, it is about sorting through all the different components of data that we have accumulated and absorbed. And this solar eclipse is very powerful for those sorts of things because it belongs, as I said, to a family. And I'll just read you what Bernadette says because it's actually a really beautiful eclipse. It's for a change. It's actually got an incredible signatures to it, and the potential is amazing. But of course, you know, it's going to depend on each of us as to how we navigate our way through this, because this solar eclipse, it is actually squaring Neptune, and Neptune is also squaring Mercury because Mercury is right there with the sun, at this solar eclipse, which is a new moon, but it is an eclipse, right? So she says, a very unusual Saros series involving sudden flashes of ideas that seem to have a psychic or unconscious flavor to them. Hunches, visions, prophetic dreams are the essence of this family of eclipses. A truly creative series which should leave the individual enriched. The ideas or hunches which come from this eclipse can actually be acted on. This is probably one of the most positive eclipses that I've actually read about in her book. Most eclipses can be quite bleak in a lot of ways, not all of them, but this is definitely one of the most optimistic and encouraging series of eclipses that we are actually in at the moment. And I value what Bernadette Brady says. It's the book I'm reading out of, uh, because she really is at her game, at a really advanced level when it comes to working with eclipses and understanding them. This lady has done, years and years and years of research and writing and teaching. And what she usually says about the eclipses is, almost always on point. She's never off the mark, really. So it encourages me a great deal to hear that she's got such positive things to say about this particular eclipse, because there are some things happening around the eclipse that, from an everyday Mercury functioning level, in terms of what we are hearing, Mercury rules the anatomy in the ear, the part of the ear that corresponds to hearing, right? Not listening, but hearing. And hearing and listening are very two different things. So Mercury rules hearing, and Venus actually rules listening. The skill and art form of listening corresponds to Venus, and it is indeed a skill and a craft. And I said this I just did a video, some of you have seen it, on wholesale houses and other house systems. And I've put a comment in the comments section under that video because somebody wrote a message, and it was very, very clear to me that they weren't listening to the content of what I was sharing about Johnny Depp. So anyway, the comments are there. You can read it yourself. But I'm just pointing out that it is my experience over many, many years that a lot of people don't really know how to listen. And I'm not being judgmental and critical. It may sound like I am, but I'm not. I'm just stating what I have observed throughout my whole life, really. And I've got a Mercury retrograde, and one of the signatures of Mercury retrograde is actually the ability to listen, because a person with Mercury retrograde tends to be so much more reflective and so much more considerate with the words that they will speak, because they don't just dart them out. They actually deeply reflect on what they are thinking about and what they are going to discuss. So this is something that I'm acutely aware of within myself and my own life, and have observed. And as a therapist and a counselor, which is another role that I engage in my life, as I've said before, one of the main components of sitting with a client is the ability to listen to them, not just hear them, but actually listen to them. these points that I'm sharing with you, whilst they may be personal to me, they're very relevant with these current energies because Mercury is retrograde during this solar eclipse, right? So let me just bring up the chart. And I know that through working with a lot of couples and individuals, you know, one of the most typical complaints that couples have about each other is my partner never listens to me. My partner never listens to me. I hear that over and over and over again, and so do so does every other therapist on the planet. It's just a very, very common experience, and I think a lot of us, you know, at different times, feel unheard. You know, and a lot of that is largely contributed to the Western world of just the overload. Pardon me, the overload of information just darting around everywhere, and very little, if any, encouragement for people to just stop, to just pause, stop and reflect and just slow down. You know, there's this craziness around busyness and achievement, and I've got to do this and I've got to have those results and I've got this deadline and I've got that deadline. That's just the you know, the very much the Western world on the personality level, induced through fear of not achieving enough, or being successful enough, or doing enough, and so on and so forth. So it's not encouraged for us to slow down and just rest our mind. You know, it's rarely encouraged unless you grew up in a school like the Rudolf Steiner schools, for instance, which promote, you know, the emotional components, the creative, imaginative components of our beingness and so forth. And unless you grew up in a family that had that way of understanding and supported, nurtured, and encouraged those sorts of processes and experiences in life, and it's not common at all. So here's chart of the solar eclipse, and you can see there's the sun and the moon, and they are conjunct, of course. Uh, so there they are there. Mercury is right next to them. Retrograde in Gemini, the ruler of this solar eclipse. And if you look down here where Neptune is, Pallas Athena is a disregard Chiron. That was just an accident going over Chiron. But Neptune and Pallas Athena are both squaring this solar eclipse and squaring Mercury, of course. So we have a number of different levels that speak to intuition, right brain, reflecting, pausing, processing, sorting through data and information, knowledge. Neptune is always the body that acts as the body that dissolves any boundaries, forms, and structure. So what is it trying to dissolve here? It's trying to dissolve the left linear brain mental faculties, where there's an overaccumulation of ideas, thoughts, and data that actually becomes a barrier for you to tune further into your intuition, because you not you specifically, but all of us are just busy, always busy accumulating more data, more information. So when Neptune touches something, it starts to dissolve the boundaries and the structures and the form of whatever it touches. So here it's clearly actually dissolving the boundaries and structures, you could say, of the left linear brain of Gemini, of what's been accumulated. And Neptune, of course, corresponds to truth, the ultimate truth, oneness, unity, inclusiveness, love, divinity, and operating, tuning into, connecting with divine source creation to all things to enable us to connect to a deeper truth that resides within ourselves. So Neptune can be so powerful in this solar eclipse, and it is, even with what Bernadette says. She says it's sudden flashes of insight, intuition, psychic activity, dreams, and so forth, imagination, right? And this is all Neptune's domain. All those words correspond to Neptune. So if we can, um, work with this eclipse from that level where we can actually let go of trying to hang on to all this mental data that's, just kind of squashed in our left brain over here, and comes back to what Sadhguru said, which is, I don't know anything. The I don't know anything acknowledges a sense of the desire to want to know more, to seek more, to understand and understand more. So this is what Neptune's gifting us through this solar eclipse. Those are the more optimistic components of this solar eclipse energy. And Mercury retrograde is just totally amplifying and addressing that this is what this energy is about. And as I said, Jeffrey says that Mercury retrograde acts through right brain intuition, Jupiter. It's that kind of energy and signature. So there's a few layers that are all pointing to the same message. The other thing that I can bring into this is some esoteric astrology, which I love to do every now and then. And it only really affirms even more everything that I've just pointed to. And that is that Gemini in esoteric astrology is ruled by Venus, and it corresponds to the fifth ray. And the fifth ray is very much about the divine mind, the mind of God, as it were. So the Gemini archetype through the esoteric level is what initially at the personality level brings in the duality, right? And which can also create the division and the polarization that is part of this 3D reality anyway. We can't avoid that day, night, male, female, hot, cold, etc., etc. Those sorts of polarities and dualities are there and will always be there, and they're not the problem. It's our mind that can be the problem with how we perceive and project. So Venus being the esoteric ruler of Gemini, in the case of this solar eclipse, I see it as the even greater potential of infusing through, first of all, creating out of that duality a third kind of experience or space, which ultimately becomes unity as opposed to duality. So let me just bring up something here. Sorry, I've got a really rough throat today. So the fifth ray is the ray of concrete science and knowledge, and the concept around that is the vehicle of expression for the ideas in the mind of God. Like I said before, the fifth ray is the mind of God. So it's the urge to reveal law through intellect, the power to express divinity through deep penetration into matter. At the soul level, those who work to be connecting links of intelligence between the abstract world of pure ideation and the concrete world of practical application, precision and exactitude in creating those forms and invention which allow for the outpouring of higher mind intelligence. So it's what I just read is summarizing or articulating in a different way what I was just saying before about the duality, the mind of God, Venus being the ruler of Gemini esoterically, which is ultimately to fuse what appears as polarities, duality, in our own mind relative to what we perceive and project, right? So that there can be a greater sense of unison and love. You know, Venus is the goddess of love. So it's not a coincidence that Venus has the rulership to Gemini esoterically. Gemini is, it is all of us from the point of view of we are all brothers and sisters on this planet. And if we all understood that and truly lived our lives from that level, we actually wouldn't see the division and the conflict and the violence and the anger and the war. We just wouldn't, because we would realize that, hey, we are all brothers and sisters, and we've all come here in the same field to have our own unique journey. And yes, that requires us to take our own path and make our own decisions and so forth. But that does not require us to become divided and create the unnecessary divisions and judgments and whatnot. So Venus, being the esoteric ruler of Gemini, it brings in the fusion of love towards all brothers and sisters on the planet. That's basically what it reflects, right? And because it's connected to the fifth ray, it tunes into the mind of God in this practical, everyday reality that we live in. So that's the esoteric component, which I really love. I think it actually just reinforces the other signatures and messages that are here, which is dissolve the barriers, dissolve the form. That could be obstructing your ability to actually learn more, to know yourself more, to understand more deeply, to tune into your intuition. When you hear these words, when I say these words, it's that they are just words, right? But to find ways to connect to what I'm saying and actually work with it in your own private, personal way can be a very enriching and powerful journey that you can go through. I think it's important to for all of us to remember that we are just one speck in this giant universe, or universes and galaxies. We are just one little speck, of this jigsaw puzzle that's infinite, really. You couldn't count all the different elements and pieces that are involved. We just perceive what we perceive relative to our, two human eyes. But there are so many layers of things. There are so many mysterious components to our life, to our soul's life, and to life in general. So one of the more a wiser, perhaps, way of navigating through life is to have the realization that there are many things we don't know. And there are some things we probably will never know, because there is an element to life that will always remain mysterious. On the other hand, what we need to know is ourself and life. We are life. So by knowing ourself, we can have a greater understanding of life, because life and you are the same thing. You are life, breathing life, right? So these are the sorts of reflections that I would encourage around this energy of the solar eclipse. The flip side to all of this, of course, can be and will be, perhaps for certain people on the planet, incredible confusion around if we don't tune into the intuitive gift that's being offered here and work creatively with our imagination and what can come through, we can get caught up in the world of duality, information, lies, deception, confusion, idealizing, and so forth, which is all the Neptune squaring this solar eclipse. So it does have that let's call it a shadow side, if you like, which is going to be probably more prominent than the optimistic, positive components of this eclipse. Because if we, I suppose, if we consider that consensus reality is around about 80% of the population, that would most likely imply that the majority of those people would be more influenced from that consensus left brain reality level, which is the Mercury squaring the Neptune, which is what it can be mental chaos and confusion and disillusionment, especially again with the nature of reality at the moment and the misinformation that is continuously being pushed out about this global situation that we are all still well and truly in. And I was also reflecting a little bit on that because we are just now about to go into week 2 of lockdown. We've just had 1 week and they've given us another week now. And it's devastating in a lot of ways. And I have tremendous empathy and sympathy for all the people that will suffer relative to their businesses, because it is their bread and butter and it is how people survive. And, I have empathy for that. And it's not easy for me as well. I'm just here independently on my own. So we are all, experiencing this in some kind of way, right? But I was just reminded when I was listening to Sadhguru that what is taking place is so much bigger than what we can predict, what we can see, and is so necessarily for the evolution of humanity and the planet. And I've said this before in previous videos, when an accumulation of a number of different phenomena all come and line up, such as planetary cycles and so forth, which has been happening for some time now, it is inevitable that it's going to present in a way that appears as crisis or cataclysmic. And the word crisis, its origins in the Chinese language, corresponds to opportunity. So again, in our human nature and our sense of our comfort zones and whatnot, we, this is all really anxiety provoking and uncomfortable, and feels like it's an extreme imposition on our freedom, right, and liberation and sovereignty. And yes, perhaps it is that too in certain ways. I'm not arguing with that, but that again, that comes back to our personality, kind of selfish kind of operation. We want what we want, and we want to do what we want, and we want to be able to be free to do what we want, etc., etc., etc. But there are a lot of things that need to change on this planet, and the change is sweeping through in a very destructive way. Eris is squaring Pluto. It wasn't going to come through, packaged up in beautiful gift boxes. It was going to come through in a very catastrophic manner, and it has, and it is. And so what Sadhguru pointed to as well was that this, and I've also said this in previous videos, this is really an opportunity for humanity to step up in their level of consciousness and understanding of what is actually happening, and what we need to do as a collective family in terms of being brothers and sisters, a human family, what we need to do together in unison, as opposed to division, separation, which creates all those other conflicting experiences in life. So he was just emphasizing the point that this is an opportunity for the human race to really, wake up into a new level of understanding and seeing, which does correspond to our lifestyle choices, what we believe, what we've been doing, etc., etc. That's the bigger picture level, and it's not an easy it's not an easy thing to accept or understand, but we're being forced to anyway, whether we like it or not. That's the consequences of everything that's happening is largely connected to that. It's like the Earth School, because this is a school, this place we're all learning. There's massive disciplinary action that's happening to the Earth School, and everyone is subjected to it, and everyone will step on the platform, come to the table to their best capability. Many people will kick and scream, and many people will be beyond that. It's going to be different for all of us, but it's the same message for all of us, regardless of who we are, how conscious we think we are, how much we think we know, and so forth. That is what is happening. The evidence is here right in front of us. So that's bigger picture levels of understanding, perceiving things, but it is important because the day-to-day things that are occurring could be better navigated. There could be better choices made if we have this connection to seeing the bigger picture. When we don't, then we just get caught up in our own selfishness and frustrations and personal desires not being met, and so on and so on and so forth, right? So it is important. So that's why I'm sharing it. Okay, so overall, this is an opportunity to work through on a very deep level in your own space, your own mental space, what can be and what needs to be integrated through your intuition for the purposes of becoming more conscious, and really being open and receptive to your imagination, right? And psychic sort of dreams and visions and things that I know a lot of you have those experiences anyway. I certainly do. So this energy really excites me. I'm really looking forward to this. Well, we're already in it, but as it gets closer and closer, it actually becomes more intensified as well. So we can be doing a lot of work around this right now, just through meditation, yoga, dream diary, journaling, writing, stimulating our own creative imaginative faculties with creative pursuits and so forth, right? And even more importantly than all of that, stopping to reflect on what we might be able to further integrate from the position of the highest truth inside of us, not what's happening out there, not what's being presented out there, not the information that you're hearing on the news, the TV, the newspaper, the whatever, but just what can you actually hear when you go into that deeper space within yourself. That's what this energy speaks to. So that's what I have to say about it. Hopefully it inspires you, because it is a very inspiring energy, solar eclipse. Also, again, with solar eclipses, certain things always come to a head and are revealed as well. Historically, especially through ancient times, solar eclipses were not regarded as a positive sort of omen. They were always a little bit scary for people. But, life was viewed, as I said in my recent video with whole sign houses and house systems, 2,000 years ago, the consciousness of the collective was at a very different place as to where it is now. We have come such a long way in our soul's evolution as individuals and as a collective family, we are so blessed and gifted to have access to tools, material that enables us to work more deeply in transpersonal ways. That's what Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are about. It's that those energies, those frequencies, they give us that gift and that ability to work on those transpersonal levels, step outside our little self, our little ego personality, and start to grasp the bigger sort of bigger picture of everything, really. So yeah, this is exciting. Neptune squaring it, it's going to dissolve a lot of shit out of the way. So just, I say, be open to that, be receptive to the dissolving dissolution that will occur, which is not very easy because the sun in the chart and a solar eclipse, which corresponds to the conscious day of our self, how we express ourselves and how we express our mind and our ideas, which has, for all of us, has an integrated mechanism of boundaries, which is healthy and important. That's why we have Saturn. But when Neptune steps in, it's literally saying, okay, I'm here to dissolve those layers. So you can either go with it or you can try and resist it. And the resisting is what will bring the more uncomfortable experiences, or even a sense of disillusionment around what you are perceiving and seeing and thinking and hearing. So it's anyway, Neptune's not an easy energy, but when we can be more open and receptive and accepting to things that we don't know, it's to the unknown. That's a good point, actually. It's being open to what's unknown. That is actually what enables us to evolve. Because by staying in what we know, we stay in that structured consensus way of thought or process or living. By stepping into the unknown, we are stepping into every sense of the potential and possibility of removing unnecessary levels of data, information, whatever it may be, and opening to the possibility of actually intuiting something much more profound and deeper that enriches our understanding of the bigger picture, which can also reduce anxiety and fear and things like that. Because at the personality level, with the way things are at the moment, it is anxiety provoking. It is terrifying for some people. It is scary. It is incredibly uncertain. There appears to be no end in sight with this chaos. And that can play havoc on our mind. And a Mercury square Neptune with all this stuff going on, that can really play havoc on our mind. So we need to be aware of that and perhaps, implement or integrate some practices as well that do help us soothe our mind, our mental space. There are many things that people can do for that. As I said, meditation, yoga, it can be herbs that you take, candles, bath, whatever. Those things are such beautiful practices that improve the quality of our life. They really do, because they can bring us into greater center, a greater sense of center in ourselves, less likely to hook into the anxieties, the fears, the frustrations, the anger, the division, all that bullshit, which it's bullshit and it's not at the same time, because it is happening. But where we have power and choice is how we respond to what is taking place. That's where we have power and choice. And that's called being aware and becoming conscious. So, see you guys soon with another video. Don't forget, if you're interested in my Venus workshops, they are available to purchase. I'm actually starting to prepare. I will start next week to prepare the next one, which will be amazing as well. If you want to know more about what that is, just email me and I can fill you in. But the most recent one I did was a 7.5 hour workshop on Venus and very specific components to Venus with all the other planets, Venus retrograde at birth. There was a number of different components to that workshop, which is why it was 7.5 hours long. So it's great for beginners and intermediate advanced people as well. There's a lot of material that is very, very deep and is not it's not what you'll find in just one book. I've drawn from numerous sources, including my own observation and experience and practice, to bring all this information together. So it's there if you're interested. All right, guys, happy solar eclipse, and take it easy. Let the mind rest a little bit. Do some soft things that can help you, go into that space to tune out of the chaos and the drama, because it can be incredibly overwhelming for sure. Much love. See you soon. Bye.